The meal that built an empire wasn't eaten by the people running it. What you're about to find out is going to change the way you look at that plate. First, much of the labor behind these elaborate breakfasts came from servants who rarely enjoyed the same meals they prepared. Second, there's a corporate rebranding story from the 1920s that buried the real origins so completely historians are still untangling it today. And third, one wartime decision by the British government nearly erased this breakfast from existence forever. But here's what none of those stories answer. If the full English breakfast was built on the labor of people who couldn't afford to eat it, why does Britain still call it a symbol of national pride? That question sits at the center of everything, and we're not going to let you off the hook until we answer it. Let's go back, not to a greasy spoon in East London, to a country house in rural England sometime around the early 1800s. The aristocracy at the time had a problem. Guests would arrive for multi-day hunting weekends, and they needed something substantial before a full day on horseback. The solution wasn't invented by a chef. It was assembled, piece by piece, by domestic servants in the kitchen at 4 in the morning before the household even woke up. Eggs, cured meat, grilled tomatoes, mushrooms foraged from the estate grounds, black pudding made from slaughterhouse scraps, and bread fried in the leftover fat from the night before. Every single component of what we now call a full English was, according to food historians, a calculated use of what was already available, designed for the wealthy table, executed by invisible hands. Here's what gets left out of every brunch menu description. The servants who cooked this meal ate something entirely different: oat porridge, stale bread, whatever was left. The layered plate, the sausage, the egg, the tomato, that was strictly for upstairs. According to culinary historians, the dish didn't even have a fixed name until the late Victorian era. Before that, it was just called a meat breakfast, or in some records, simply the gentleman's morning table. So who invented it? The honest answer is a generation of unnamed working-class women in country house kitchens who assembled it from necessity and someone else's leftovers. By the mid-1800s, the British middle class was rising, and with it came a new ambition: to eat like the gentry. Urban boarding houses and railway hotels began serving simplified versions of the country house meat breakfast, and this is where the money trail starts to get interesting. Some historians argue this was less about cultural pride and more about market capture. The full English as a named, marketed concept was, according to several food writers, partly a commercial invention designed to move product. The original servant kitchen version of this meal looked almost nothing like what arrives at your table today. Black pudding was central, not optional. The sausage was a coarse, hand-stuffed meat link with visible fat and grain filler. The egg was always fried in rendered lard, not oil. Tomatoes, when they appeared at all, were grilled, never raw, never decorative. And the bread, fried in pan drippings until it could hold the weight of everything else stacked on top. No baked beans. That addition, widely credited to the influence of American canned goods companies, reportedly Heinz in particular, didn't appear on the standard plate until the mid-20th century. Today, it's considered essential by half the population. Modern full English components are now largely factory-produced. The sausage contains legally permitted filler percentages. The bacon is wet-cured with brine injection rather than dry salted for weeks. The eggs are battery farmed at industrial scale.
Even the mushrooms, reportedly the most frequently sourced imported item on the plate, often come from the Netherlands and Poland, not the English countryside. Think about the last time you ordered a full English at a motorway service station. The eggs arrived from a carton, the sausages were pre-cooked and reheated, the tomatoes came out of a tin. Would the kitchen workers who assembled the first version of this dish at 4 in the morning in a fire-lit country house even recognize what you ate that morning? The full English is ancient. False. As a standardized, named meal, it's barely 100 years old. The Victorians didn't eat full Englishes, they ate ad hoc meat breakfasts without a fixed recipe or cultural identity. It's uniquely British. Complicated. The Irish full breakfast, eggs, sausage, bacon, soda bread, white pudding, predates several components of the English version and was documented in Irish household records earlier than the English standardized form. The Scottish version adds haggis and tattyscones. The Welsh version adds laverbread. Every nation in the British Isles has its own claim. Rationing during World War II temporarily killed it. Here's the truth. Rationing didn't kill it, it mutated it. When bacon, eggs, and sausages were all controlled goods, British households reportedly substituted with powdered egg, spam, and fried bread alone. The government actually published wartime austerity breakfast recipes to keep the ritual alive with substitute ingredients. The meal survived by becoming a ghost of itself.
And now, back to the question we opened with. If the full English was built by people who couldn't eat it, why does Britain still claim it as a symbol of national pride? According to cultural historians, that's precisely the mechanism of how national food identity works. Over time, the people who prepared these meals faded from the popular story, while the dish itself became part of national identity. The story that survives is the one that flatters the people with the power to tell it. The full English breakfast almost became a working-class meal. After World War II, as rationing lifted and living standards began rising, the meat breakfast moved down market into transport cafes, dock workers' canteens, factory floor diners. For about 30 years, the full English was considered low-status food, associated with manual labor, with grease and speed, and eating with your hands. The upper and middle classes had largely abandoned it for continental options, croissants, yogurt, fruit. The meal that originated as aristocratic fuel had, by the 1970s, become the breakfast of lorry drivers and builders. And then something unexpected happened. In the 1980s and 1990s, a cultural reversal took place. Celebrity chefs began elevating the full English. Gastropubs started charging £12 for what a transport cafe sold for 50 pence. Food critics wrote about artisan sausage and heritage breed. The working-class meal became a weekend luxury, a brunch item, a thing people photographed for Instagram before eating. You've scrolled past it on Deliveroo on a Sunday morning. You've seen it on a pub menu next to a craft beer list. You've ordered it at a hotel buffet at 8:30, feeling vaguely patriotic. What you were eating was a story about power, told by the people who always get to tell the story. Every dish hides a version of this story. The credit goes somewhere it doesn't belong, the labor disappears, the myth hardens into fact. That's what this channel exists to break open, one plate at a time. If that matters to you, subscribe, because next time the dish we're pulling apart has a secret that goes back 500 years and involves a continent most people never connect to the recipe. Here's your question for the comments. What's the meal you grew up eating that you recently found out has a completely different history than you were told? Drop it below. I'll feature the most surprising one in an upcoming episode.